Hey everyone, and welcome. Let's talk about something a little uncomfortable today. Let's talk about stupidity. But not in the way you might think. We're not talking about a lack of book smarts or not knowing facts. We're going much deeper into the realm of the human psyche, guided by one of the most profound minds in history, the analytical psychologist, Carl Jung. Jung spent his life mapping the hidden landscapes of the human soul. He didn't just study what we're aware of. He dove headfirst into the vast, dark ocean of the unconscious, all those thoughts, feelings, and potentials that we aren't even aware of. And from his work, we get a fascinating and, frankly, a bit terrifying definition of what it really means to be foolish. It's not about a low IQ. It's about a life lived on autopilot, a life where we are strangers to ourselves. So, in this conversation, we're going to explore the 6 signs, according to Carl Jung, that a person might be living in a state of unconscious folly. This isn't about pointing fingers at others. It's an invitation for self-reflection. A mirror held up by Jungian psychology to see if we recognize any of these patterns in ourselves. Because the goal, as Jung would say, is to become more whole, more conscious, more truly free. Part 1. How to confront your shadow self for true personal growth. Let's start with perhaps Jung's most famous concept, the shadow. Now, this isn't a spooky monster hiding in the closet. The shadow is a core part of Jungian psychology. Think of it like this: from the moment we're born, we're taught what's good, what's acceptable, what makes us lovable. We pack away all the parts of ourselves that don't fit that mold: our anger, our jealousy, our selfishness, our insecurities, our wild impulses. We shove them down into the basement of our psyche, into the unconscious, and we try to lock the door. That bundle of rejected stuff, that's your shadow. Now, here's where the foolishness begins. The naive, unconscious person thinks out of sight, out of mind. They believe that by ignoring their dark side, it ceases to exist. But Jung tells us the exact opposite happens. The shadow doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. It grows stronger in the dark. And then, it starts to run the show from behind the scenes. You see, when you don't accept your own shadow, you can't integrate it. It remains the separate, powerful entity within you. And how does it express itself? Well, you start to see it everywhere else. This is what Jung called projection. You get irrationally angry at a colleague for being arrogant, but you can't see your own arrogance. You harshly judge someone for being lazy, but you refuse to acknowledge your own procrastination. You're constantly annoyed by neediness in others, but you won't face your own deep-seated insecurities. This is a classic sign of an unintegrated shadow. You become a person who blames the world, who judges others, who lives in a state of defensiveness. You build your life on a foundation of manipulation and a subtle sense of superiority, all to keep that basement door locked tight. But it's exhausting. It creates immense internal conflict. You lose your spiritual balance because you rage constantly at war with a part of yourself you won't even admit exists. Jung said something incredibly powerful. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The path to true freedom, to what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, individual self, requires you to turn on the light in that basement. It takes immense courage to open that door, to look your shadow in the eye, and to say, okay, you're a part of me too. The foolish person spends their life running from this confrontation. They prefer a superficial, sanitized version of themselves. But the wise person knows that true intelligence begins with the ability to recognize these dark corners of the soul. Only by accepting your shadow can you transform it. Only then can you understand yourself on a deeper level and stop projecting your own mess onto everyone around you. The first step towards psychological growth is always to make the unconscious conscious. Part 2. Why deep thinking is the key to unlocking your consciousness. Alright, let's move on to the second sign, a lack of deep thinking. Now, for Jung, consciousness wasn't just about having a bunch of information in your head. It wasn't about memorizing facts or having clever opinions. Consciousness was a quality of awareness. It was about the depth at which you perceive events, thoughts, and most importantly, yourself. The unconscious person, the one living foolishly, is mentally lazy. They stay on the surface. They take events at face value. They never ask why. They avoid any analysis that requires real mental effort. Why? Because it's comfortable. It's easy. It doesn't challenge their preconceived notions of the world. But over time, this mental laziness builds its own prison. It limits a person to a very narrow framework of thinking. They simplify complex events. Instead of trying to understand the intricate, interconnected systems of life, they want everything to be black and white. Something is either completely true or completely false. A person is either all good or all bad. There's no room for a nuance, for a contradiction, for a mystery. Jung believed that one of our greatest human capacities is the ability to expand our consciousness. But the person who refuses to think deeply gets stuck between learned ideas and superficial opinions. They become their own mind's worst enemy. They guide their life with shallow interpretations and snap judgments, never bothering to look beneath the surface. Deep thinking means being willing to hold contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. It means considering events from multiple perspectives. It means questioning your own beliefs, checking them, and being willing to disprove them. The unconscious person does the opposite. They selectively accept information that confirms what they already believe and completely reject anything that challenges their worldview. This is the birthplace of dogma, of prejudice, of polarization. A person incapable of deep thinking loses mental flexibility. They can't see the bigger picture. They get trapped in the beliefs of the past and become closed off to new thoughts. Jung argued that we can only become truly free by discovering the patterns in our unconscious. But how can you do that if you never venture below the surface of your own mind? This isn't just an individual problem. It has social consequences. It leads to misunderstandings, manipulation, and a society that can't have complex conversations. True wisdom, according to Jung, starts with the ability to critically assess yourself and your environment. The unconscious personalities, he warned, become prisoners of their own shadows without even realizing it, while those who explore their inner world achieve a freedom that no external circumstance can take away. Part 3. Stop the blame game. A Jungian path to self-development. This third sign is a direct consequence of the first two. It's the constant, habitual blaming of others. According to Jung, one of the biggest obstacles to psychological development is this, avoiding responsibility. Think about it. When something negative happens in your life, what's your first instinct? For the unconscious person, it's to look outward. It's the boss's fault, the partner's fault, the government's fault, the world's fault. This mental mechanism is a form of self-defense. Taking responsibility for our own mistakes, our own shortcomings, is painful for the ego. It's a blow to our self-image. So, to protect itself, the ego projects the blame outwards. In the short term, this feels great. It provides immediate relief. You get to feel like the wronged party, the victim. You get a sense of moral superiority. But in the long term, as you can probably guess, it's a psychological disaster. Why? Because when you blame everyone else for your failures, your unhappiness, and your disappointments, you blind yourself to your own flaws. You see no reason to change, to grow, to transform. All the problems are out there. So, you make zero progress on the inside. Over time, this weakens you internally. It puts you in a permanent position of powerlessness. You become a victim of your own life, rather than the author of it. This blaming behavior also ruins relationships. The person who constantly blames others is always looking for a scapegoat. In friendships, in families, at work, tension constantly rises because they never question their own role in a conflict. They create a toxic environment where genuine connection is impossible. Jung was clear: genuine transformation requires self-criticism. It requires the courage to turn the spotlight inward. You have to be willing to see your own shadows, your own fears, your own insecurities. The person who blames others has turned off this mechanism entirely. They are projecting all their internal negativity onto the people around them. But here's the tragic irony. By refusing to see your own faults, you are doomed to repeat them. You'll make the same mistakes over and over again, trapped in a victim mentality. Jung believed that conscious transformation is only possible through understanding your own psychological processes. But if you're spending all your energy finding faults in the external world, you'll never do the inner work required to become whole. To achieve that inner wholeness and become truly free, you must have the courage to take responsibility for your life, shadows and all. Part 4. Finding Meaning. How to understand Jungian symbols and myths. Now, this fourth sign is a bit more subtle, but incredibly profound. It's the inability to understand symbols and myths. Jung discovered that deep within the human psyche, there is a layer he called the collective unconscious. It's a kind of psychic inheritance, a reservoir of experiences shared by all of humanity throughout history. And this deep layer expresses itself not in logical sentences, but through symbols, images, and myths. Think of symbols and myths as a secret language of the soul. They are like bridges that allow us to comprehend our inner world. Our dreams, our fantasies, even the patterns we see in our lives are full of symbolic meaning. They are messages from the unconscious, trying to guide us, warn us, or show us a path to greater wholeness. But the unconscious person is closed off to this symbolic world. They are literalists. They focus only on the concrete, material, surface-level reality. A dream is just a dream. A myth is an old, silly story. They ignore the deep messages coming from within. As a result, they live in a psychologically impoverished state. They are cut off from the wisdom of their own soul. Jung explained this through his theory of archetypes, universal, primal patterns that shape our psychology. A person who cannot analyze the symbolic meaning of the images that recur in their dreams, or the themes that play out in their life, is living disconnected from their own unconscious processes. In ancient times, myths served as guides. They gave people a sense of meaning, a connection to something larger than themselves. But in our modern, hyper-rational world, many people have lost this connection. We've replaced spiritual meaning with material success and external goals. The person who can't understand symbols and myths often ends up in a huge void. They might be mechanically successful, but they feel a deep sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction because their inner world is starved. Jungian analysis is largely about relearning this symbolic language, It's about understanding that the hero's journey in a myth is also your journey, that the dragon in a fairy tale might represent the shadow you need to face. A person closed off to symbolic thinking lacks the courage to confront their own shadow. They are unable to develop the depth of their own psychological process and end up living life on autopilot, driven by automatic reactions. This inability is one of the biggest obstacles to psychological and spiritual development. True consciousness begins with the ability to grasp the wisdom offered by symbols and myths. Those who can't read this language unconsciously alienate themselves from their inner world and continue to live their lives unaware of the deep currents moving beneath the surface. Part 5. Mastering your instincts for a more conscious and purposeful life. Let's talk about instincts. Jung recognized that our unconscious world is formed by powerful instincts. These are the basic drives for survival, sex, power, and connection. They are a fundamental part of being human. There's nothing wrong with them. The problem isn't having instincts. The problem is being controlled by them. The fifth sign of a foolish and conscious person is the inability to control instinctive behavior. For Jung, developed consciousness requires us to recognize these primal impulses, confront them, and consciously channel them in healthy ways. When a person can't do this, their life is run by reactive, impulsive responses. The primitive aspects of their psyche dominate. They become a slave to their desires and fears. They are impulsive, quick-tempered, and often make decisions they later regret. It's a situation where the individual loses their own will to the chaos of the unconscious. Jung's concept of the psyche includes not just the conscious ego, but also powerful elements like the shadow and the persona, the mask we show the world. If a person doesn't develop a conscious mechanism for control, they can be swept away by these forces. They are led by their instincts rather than leading them. True consciousness isn't about denying your instincts. That's just another form of repression, which, as we know, makes the shadow stronger. Instead, it's about understanding them and consciously directing their energy. Think of it like taming a wild horse. You don't kill the horse, that's its power and vitality. But you also don't let it run wild, trampling everything in its path. You learn to ride it, to guide it, to use its strength for a purposeful journey. A person who cannot control their instincts gets stuck in a cycle of chasing short-term pleasures. They can't work toward long-term goals because they are constantly distracted by immediate impulses. This makes the process of individuation, the journey towards self-realization, impossible. How can you explore your inner world if you're constantly being jerked around by every passing desire? Jung emphasized that achieving psychological wholeness requires balancing the chaotic energies of the inner world. True freedom comes when you can filter your impulsive reactions through a conscious mind. Otherwise, you're doomed to repeat the same mistakes, trapped in the same cycles, a prisoner of your own unconscious. Part 6. The Inner Compass. Why your journey inward is the real path to fulfillment. Finally, we come to the sixth sign, focusing only on the external world. Jungian psychology is all about balance. A healthy person is aware of their inner world and consciously engages with the external world. But the unconscious person makes a critical error. They focus exclusively on the outside and completely ignore their inner processes. These people build their entire identity on external factors, societal expectations, material success, status, and the approval of others. Their sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on what they have, what they achieve, and what other people think of them. From Jung's perspective, this is a recipe for disaster. It leads to a complete loss of connection with one's own essence over time. No matter how much external success they achieve, they experience a feeling of inner emptiness. Why? because the human soul deeply craves meaning. And that meaning can only be found by turning inward. People who are overly focused on the external world typically live according to a script written by society. They are dependent on external validation and live a superficial life. They might be obsessed with their career, their social status, and their material possessions, but eventually they hit a wall. They realize that these external elements don't bring genuine, lasting fulfillment. Jung said that the true journey, the adventure of individuation, is an inner journey. It's about discovering your own unconscious, building your true identity from the inside out. But a person who is fixated on the external world is constantly worried about outside opinions. They can't hear their own inner voice. They are forced to see themselves through the eyes of others. This often leads to a state of constant dissatisfaction. No external success can fill an internal void. A person who feels good only when they are succeeding can experience a deep identity crisis when they face failure. They have no inner foundation to fall back on. Jung argued that confronting yourself and discovering your unconscious processes is one of the most important stages of spiritual development. Your true identity isn't revealed through external labels, but through the exploration of your own inner depths. People who are stuck in the external world avoid this inner work. They perceive life only on a surface level. True satisfaction comes from a balance of external success and the profound awareness of your inner world, as Jung would warn. Those who never turn inward will inevitably find themselves on a meaningless quest. Because human nature simply cannot be satisfied by the external world alone. A conversation with you, the path to consciousness. So, what do you think? This is just the beginning of the conversation in our modern, hyper-connected world. Do you think we give enough time to our inner world, or are we constantly busy, distracted by a never-ending stream of external stimuli, social media, news, entertainment? The pursuit of more? What do you do to connect with your inner self? Do you journal, meditate, spend time in nature, pay attention to your dreams? Have you ever recognized one of these 6 signs in your own life? That moment of projection, that tendency to blame, that feeling of being driven by impulses you don't understand. I truly believe that sharing our experiences is how we learn and grow together. So please, share your thoughts, your stories, your insights in the comments below. Your ideas will only deepen this discussion for everyone. If you want to continue this journey of exploring the depths of the human psyche, of becoming more conscious and whole, then please don't be a stranger here. If this resonated with you, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what allows us to keep creating content that, hopefully, helps us all understand ourselves a little better. We'll see you in the next video. And by the way, the join button is active for the channel. Becoming a member is a fantastic way to show your support and help us create even more content. Thank you so much for your time and your curiosity. Until next time, take good care and maybe spend a little time listening to that quiet voice within.